영어로 읽는 세상 화이트무스 영어교실 2025년 8월 26일 BBC가 보도한 내용입니다. 한국의 이재명 대통령과 미국의 도널드 트럼프 대통령이 만났습니다. 두 정상은 경제 협력과 무역 문제를 논의하는 한편 북한 문제에도 상당한 시간을 할애했습니다. 이재명 대통령은 평화를 위한 협력을 강조하며 트럼프의 과거 북미 관계를 높이 평가했고 트럼프는 김정은 위원장과 다시 만날 의지를 보였습니다. 또한 미군 기지와 방위비 분담, 한국산 제품에 대한 미국의 관세 문제까지 다뤄지며 이번 회담은 한미 관계의 전략적 이해관계를 다시 확인하는 자리가 되었습니다.
They wanted to go in, praise Donald Trump, work on this area of North Korea where the leaders do have common ground in the hope that they could avoid some sort of confrontation, and they succeeded.
Our White House reporter, Bernda Boosman, gave us this update at the end of the meeting.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung came to the White House earlier today in what could have been a tense Oval Office meeting with President Trump. Earlier in the day, President Trump took to Truth Social to say that there was a purge or revolution happening in South Korea. That post was in reference to an investigation into President Lee's predecessor, President Yoon, over a short-lived declaration of martial law in South Korea in December. But when he got here, President Lee and President Trump had an extremely cordial meeting in which they lavished praise on each other as well as the U.S. and South Korean economic relationship. Now, they also discussed North Korea, and both men seemed keen for President Trump to once again meet with North Korean President Kim Jong-un, a repeat of something that happened in the first Trump administration.
Great relationship with Kim Jong-un. I hope it stays that way. I think it will. I have a very good relationship.
Live now to Seoul and our correspondent Jean McKenzie. Jean, it seems both leaders are on the same page when it comes to trying to engage with North Korea.
Yeah, it's one of the few areas I think that they really have in common. And, look, it might actually look strange to see a US president sitting there in the Oval Office next to the leader of South Korea talking about how much he gets on with the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, how much he's looking forward to seeing him again. This is South Korea's sworn enemy. But it was actually President Lee, South Korea's president, who initiated this conversation. He was the one that was praising Donald Trump for managing to establish such a good rapport with Kim Jong-un in his first term and asking President Trump to really help play a role here on the Korean Peninsula to establish peace between the two sides. Because President Lee is trying to take a very different approach to North Korea, he does want to talk to Kim Jong-un. He wants to try and establish peaceful relations between the North and South. But look, this was also a key part of South Korea's strategy going into this meeting. They wanted to try to get on President Trump's good side. They wanted to try to establish a good rapport between the two leaders because this is the first time they have ever met. And the South Korean side were incredibly nervous going into this meeting. They know that President Trump is unpredictable. President Trump has in the past criticised South Korea. He has criticised it for its trade surplus with the United States. He has criticised it for its defence spending. He has called South Korea a freeloader for the tens of thousands of troops that the US has stationed here in South Korea. And what the South Korean side was really worried about was that President Lee might get a similar sort of dressing down that we saw President Zelensky get back in the Oval Office in February, where J.D. Vance and President Trump really went for him. So they wanted to go in, praise Donald Trump, work on this area of North Korea where the leaders do have common ground in the hope that they could avoid some sort of confrontation, and they succeeded.
Yeah, they do seem to be getting along quite well because it's not just North Korea that they are on the same page with, but when it comes to trade as well, there seems to be a lot of deals being made from Boeing to shipbuilding.
Yeah, and this Oval Office meeting, this summit in Washington, was really supposed to be focusing on that trade deal that South Korea and the US agreed just ahead of Trump's deadline back at the end of July. We haven't seen the details of what has been worked out, what still needs to be agreed. We hopefully will get that in the coming days. But the key strategy, as I said, from South Korea today was to make sure that Lee left the Oval Office on good terms with Trump, and that they seem to have achieved.
Now, let's speak to Victor Cha, President of the Geopolitics and Foreign Policy Department and Korea Chair at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies think tank. Mr. Cha.
But to me, what was surprising about the press briefing was how much time they spent on North Korea, in large part because Lee really sort of set that up. The South Korean president set that up by telling Trump what a peace builder he was and how He wants Trump to make peace on the Korean Peninsula, talking about a Trump Tower in North Korea. Kim Jong-un is waiting for Trump to build a golf course in North Korea, all these sorts of things. And then the conversation just turned to Trump and his good meetings with Kim Jong-un. So I think from a South Korean perspective, this particular government, they are probably very happy with the outcome of that press briefing.
And Mr. Trump floated the idea of the United States taking ownership, as he put it, of a US military base on land in South Korea. How welcome would that be?
Yeah, that was a very interesting comment. I don't know if that is, that may be something that they're talking about in terms of Trump's desire for South Korea to pay more in terms of cost sharing and burden sharing. Right now, South Korea pays about a little over $1 billion a year for U.S. forces in Korea. Trump wants that to be $5 or $10 billion. The South Koreans built Camp Humphreys in South Korea, which is the largest U.S. military base outside of the United States. And this may be one of the ways that South Korea is trying to account for increased cost sharing by basically on the books putting that in U.S. hands. That could be something that they're thinking about because the South Koreans know that Trump wants Korea to pay more. He's talking about $5 billion, $10 billion US dollars, that sort of thing. So maybe that's something that they're talking about behind closed doors.
The importance economically of the relationship between the United States and South Korea was certainly made clear. To what extent will the tariffs that have been imposed by Donald Trump on South Korean imports feature, do you believe, in these talks?
Oh, I certainly think they'll feature. South Korea got down to 15% from the original 25% reciprocal tariffs. There's been no change on steel and aluminum, which hurts Korea, at 50%. All of these things mainly affect their car exports, which is a huge export of South Korea's to the United States, 1 million units per year. So this will clearly be a big topic in discussion. For the U.S., it'll be the $350 billion of investment that South Korea has promised in the United States, plus another $100 billion for energy, $150 billion for shipbuilding. And they'll want to see more details on that. Lutnick and others will want more details from the Koreans on how that's going to be done. Because Trump said it all has to be not South Korean investment for South Korean win, but South Korean investment for U.S. jobs, U.S. industry, these sorts of things. So that will be, that will have to be fought out in the negotiations after the summit, most likely.